tell me if this chimes with you as fellow collectors. I spent a lot of time in 2022 not buying the Sarb033. Simply wasn't prepared to pay over the odds for a hyped watch. So instead, in order to get a similar wrist presence, I went for the SEIKO 5 SNKL45, the black dial, which is great. I also went for the SEIKO Sarb033 with the blue dial, quartz, it's 40mm. Similar look to the Sarb033. I also went for the Citizen JDM NB1050, the blue dial that is on this channel. There's a black and a white dial with that watch. That is very close in dimensions to the Sarb. It's a 38mm case. It has a good higher series, 9 series Miyota movement. I found it a bit blingy. Eventually, I discovered the Sari57, which was great. It still is great. I've got slightly larger wrists, just over 7 inches. It fits me perfectly. Doesn't have loom. And eventually, nearly 2 years later, I thought, I'm going to find out, these Sarbs now are getting quite old. See if I can find a decent one. See what the fuss is about. The watchiosi would have you believe that this particular watch, the Sarb033, is one of the holy grails of watch collecting. In the same vein as they will talk about the Omega Speedmaster, the Rolex Submariner, the Grand Seiko Snowflake, the Sarb033. However, as we've just mentioned with the Citizen, there are a lot of alternatives now as well that do a similar thing. New Erebus Ascent coming out, etc. And whether it is indeed still relevant in 2024 after all the releases we've seen in the last few years. Oh, by the way, can you just, if you like these videos, can you just subscribe and like and share the videos? It takes a few seconds, costs nothing, but it does help the channel. Thanks. My first impression on unboxing the great Sarb033 was that I was a little bit underwhelmed. I did say this was going to be controversial. I don't know what I expected. This watch really has been hyped. Slightly underwhelmed, and I didn't feel that way when I unboxed the Sari57. I was the opposite. I was amazed when I unboxed the Sari. So that's the first point of note, my first impressions. The other first impression I had was that the watch itself, for being quite small, is quite a weight. So that does strike me as a well-engineered item of quality. I am not planning to do a full spec review on this watch. There are plenty of other videos, dozens online, that will give you that information. I'm much more interested in how the Sarb fits into a modern portfolio these days, especially with some of the newcomers now, some of the micro brands on the scene, for the sort of prices that you would pay for a used one of these. So that's what I'm interested in. I'm also interested in what the Sarb actually offers in terms of quality and in particular wearability. You can see here, so the original hang tag, that I believe this is a 2015 model. It was 45,000 yen, which in today's exchange rates, that's £227. So this was not an expensive watch. They are around double that now for a decent example. So this is a good opportunity to see the three together, the three ranges that SEIKO offered there. The SEIKO 5 on the left, the Sari 57 in the middle, and then you've got the Spirit line, the Sarb, the higher echelon, the 6R movement as opposed to the 4R movement and the Sari. For me and my wrist size, I still do really like the Sari 57 in the middle. The Sarb, you can see there, is considerably smaller. Both have turned down lugs, so they both hug the wrist, and it pretty much is dependent on wrist size as to which would be better for you. Both have the same signed crown. It has compact dimensions, there's no doubt about it. With a 38mm case, it's only 11.5mm thick. The turned down lugs, that case shape is the Sarb shape that you would also get with the Alpinists, although they would have more than one crown. The case shape really does give this watch a lot of wrist appeal. Signed crown, again, for this price range, something you wouldn't always see. What I particularly like about the Sarb is the way it's finished. So you've got the high polish here. You then have a little step to the rest of the lugs, which are flat brushed. Then you go back to the polish on the bezel. Display case back, the 6R movement, which is supposed to have between 50 and 60 hours of power reserve, and it's also not supposed to be as accurate as the basic 4R movements, which I have certainly found to be very accurate and easily regulated. Change of clothes. The days are going by wearing this Sarb. I am getting drawn into it. I even find the SEIKO 5 bracelets to be comfortable, and I've got quite hairy arms. So when I've worn this, I find it fine. It's got quite a rugged look about it, sporty everyday look, which I like. I do think I've got a reasonable example. The way I would judge that is by not only the crystal, but also the bezel, which only has a few hairline scratches on it. And with this model, I got the box and the hang tag, the spare links, and a blank guarantee card, so who knows if that was the original. And of course it does have that loom. It does have good loom, the Sarb. Week on the wrist with a Sarb. It's interesting. What do I think? Well, it started to feel like an old friend. It does everything pretty well. Just think about this for a minute. The Sarb has actually pulled off a very rare feat in the horological world. Even when the more prestigious brands that experienced pandemic-fueled cash handout hype a few years ago only to fall back substantially more recently, the Sarb's elevated price has stood firm at roughly double its RRP. It hasn't wavered, and remember, this is for a mass-produced timepiece that's sold in its thousands from a mainstream brand. You could say that SEIKO undervalued it initially, and that indeed the secondary market knows best. This watch has now found its natural level. Now, based purely on inflation, my 2015 model would be selling at £300 RRP now, which is still a great value offering. Certainly judging by SEIKO's current £300 offerings, the new SNXS for example, which has mineral crystal 4-hour movement, the Sarb represented extremely good value. But this alone doesn't explain the Sarb's value retention. The current Alpinist range, which has the same high-spec movement, the sapphire crystal, the case shape, still doesn't hold the same value as the Sarb. No, it's something else. And after admittedly an uninspiring first acquaintance with the Sarb, it does find its way inside like no other. And I can explain this in only one way, an X factor. For me now, looking at the Sarb, I don't think it should be compared specifically with the new watches that are coming out by some of the micro brands. I can see how it's become an icon. What will my journey be with this Sarb going forward? Well, I didn't know what to expect. It had been hyped. It's no longer in production. I am a collector after all. I've got a good example, so I will be keeping hold of it. I feel that a few years on from the end of production, it is entering the world of a modern classic, and it could very well end up as a future vintage classic. It's a nice little watch, a little do-it-all everyday sports watch that will keep on ticking for years, hugs the wrist beautifully, and is discontinued. So a collector would look at this watch differently. We would say it's a collectible. Oh, and by the way, regards to the purchase decision, whether it's a little bit spontaneous or reckless, in situations like this, with a collectible piece like the Sarb, that money hasn't gone. It hasn't really been extravagant. It's just been parked in the Sarb. It's still there. It's just moved from one place to another.